everybody, and welcome back to the Deeply Rooted podcast by Planting Roots. Happy Wednesday. We are so excited to be back today on episode 4 of our...
We're on episode 5.
Oh, episode 5! Sorry, I'm losing count. Episode 5 of our Getting Back to Our Roots study. So today we're going to be talking about community and why it's important. So we're super excited to dive into today's topic and just talk all about building godly community where you're planted.
Yeah, if you missed the last episodes, go back and check those out. They're full of some awesome wisdom, full of lots of the word. We talked about a lot of scripture, so definitely go back and check those out. The first one we talked about just a bit about the history of Planting Roots and where we're at moving forward, the vision for Planting Roots, and kind of a bit about us too. So go check that out. And if you're not already subscribed, if you're watching on YouTube, hit that subscribe button. And if you're streaming on another podcast platform, make sure you follow along, give us a review. Anything helps. And you can always follow us on Instagram at Planting Roots 1, Facebook at Planting Roots, or check out our website at plantingroots.net. So we'll jump into the importance of being rooted in community.
So I guess we can start off with the question on why it's important to have godly community, because I feel like we should speak to that girl who's like, yeah, I moved to this new place, but like, why do I need a godly community? Can't I just watch church online? I'm going to have phone call my friends who are in a different state. Like, why can't I do that? Why do I need to have community where I am?
Which is also such a big question for military life specifically, because it is gaining friends, especially as women, it's a lot of work. Like, it
takes time.
It takes time. And I mean, I've heard people explain this in a relationship with God, that it's not necessarily quality over quantity. Like, you'd think that, like, with friendships, you just want to have quality, not necessarily quantity. But honestly, with relationships, with God, with people, with God and people, it takes quantity to build quality. Like, you need that time. You need to get to know each other and, like, actively do life with each other.
And you have to do it fast because you're not planned for very long.
Yeah,
usually.
So it's definitely an understandable question to ask, like, what's the point? Like, well, I'm only going to be here for 2 years, so why do I need to develop deep friendships when it takes a lot of work and you're not going to feel like you might not even feel close to them until halfway through your time living in one place.
Yeah, I feel like I've been in Texas for a little over a year, and I'm now, like, rooted in my community and have a really good...
And you're getting ready to leave this year.
Yeah, I know. And then I'm probably leaving this summer, so it's like... But it was really worthwhile, I think, investing in
Why was it worthwhile, and why is it important?
Well, I think there's an analogy that I heard on, I think, the Becoming Something podcast, which I really like, so check that out. But it was an analogy, and I'm a runner, so I resonate with any running analogy, and I'm training for a marathon right now, so this analogy goes hand in hand with that. But they were talking on the podcast about how you need people around you to remind you that you're not there yet. Like, having people that are eternally minded, that are going to be, you're not there yet. And it's like when you're at, like, mile 20 of a marathon, it's like when it really starts to hurt and you have, like, 6.2 miles left. So the people on the course cheering you on, reminding you, you're not there yet, keep going, you got this, like, that's what's going to push you through to the end. And the same can be said for life here on earth. We need those people who know the gospel and know God, who can be planted in our communities, reminding us that you're not there yet, keep going. You can do this. Like, continue to spend time in the Word and spend time with God and invest in your relationship with Him, because you are working towards the finish of such an incredible race. So I really like that, and I feel like that has really resonated with me and reminded me to stay involved in my community, because I can get complacent sometimes and be like, Matt's underway, I don't feel like going to small group tonight. Like, it's really hard to just do things on my own, which is so weird. But it can be hard when your spouse is gone to keep to the same routines, especially if you have kids. I can't imagine. I don't have kids, so I don't have that aspect as well. But I know whenever I go, I just come back filled up and ready to continue on my week. And I know it's something that's so important. And it's also that verse in, is it Proverbs, iron sharpens iron? I think I've written it down, as iron sharpens iron, so one person sharpens another. And it's like that saying, how we're the average of, I think, of like the 5 people friends, we spend the most time with. And if our goal is to look more like Jesus, like, we're trying to become more like Jesus during our time on earth, and be His hands and feet here. And then we need to surround ourselves with people who look like Jesus and point us to Him. So the times where I've struggled most with my faith are when I haven't been surrounded by a godly community. And I think that's also a big part of our testimony. The reason we became Christians is because of the godly community that was placed around us. So I think it's so important to continue to have that around you and continue to point yourself to Jesus.
Yeah, I mean, like the verse in Revelation talks about, like, you forsaking your first love, like go back to the things that you did at first. For us, like the first thing that we really found God in was community. And we talked about that a lot in episode 1. So if you missed it, go back.
Mm-hmm.
But Liz and I both, like, we had things in life figured out, but there was something missing that we saw in other people that we really wanted to emulate, and seeing it in them showed us that we were missing something. And so it caused us to ask questions and get to know people and get to know the Lord through people. So yeah, I think for me, another reason that it's important to have godly community, and one that it's almost harder to swallow, is that we need it for accountability and conviction. Like sometimes it's easier to not hang out with Christian friends because non-Christians are not going to call you out for things that Christians might call you out for. But I know that I have personally needed the refinement that relationships with other Christians brings. I think if you're just living by yourself, or we've talked about like my time on the boat, like when I was one of few Christians, it was easier to just kind of live my life the way that I wanted to, and I didn't necessarily have anybody around me who was asking me what I'm reading in the Word, or asking me, how my heart is doing, and any questions that would build me up towards Christ. And so it was easier to like slowly slip away. But when I have those people who are like pouring into my life and doing it in a sometimes hard to hear way, although it's hard to hear at first, it's what is making me more like Jesus. So that's another super crucial part of community. It's not always comfortable, and you're going to go through different seasons with different friends, but pushing through that really teaches you to be more like Jesus.
And bringing I think community is also important because you're going to need to bring like your things you're struggling with to the light.
Yeah.
And that's an important part of growth. So I think that also goes along with that. People calling you out and you confessing your sins.
Absolutely.
And your community and having that accountability, I think, is super important as well.
Absolutely.
I think another reason why it's important to have community is we need people around us to help bear each other's burdens. I think that my community has helped me through a lot, and I think that's such an important part of being in community. In Galatians, it talks about in chapter 6, it says, carry each other's burdens, and in this way you will fulfill the law of Christ. So just carrying each other's burdens and being there for each other during hard times in your life. Like you need those people to remind you you're not there yet, but remind you that you're not there yet and remind you to keep going.
Well, that's another thing too, is that I think we often can look at community in sort of a consumer mindset. Like we can look at it and be like, okay, I need community because it'll fill me up and it'll like give me fun things to do and that sort of thing. But also we have to put ourselves on the other side of the picture and be like, okay, like even if I don't necessarily feel like going to Bible study tonight, or even if you feel like, okay, I don't need to go to Bible study tonight, I'm in a good spot, like my walk with the Lord is solid, like I don't need that. Just because you don't need that, and probably more so because you're in a place where you are solid, it's even more reason to go and to be a light and to be able to speak into other people's lives and to, like you said, bear their burdens. And you mentioned the iron sharpens iron verse. Like it's not always going to be us that need sharpening. Like sometimes God uses us in ways that we wouldn't expect if we just show up and we be present. So
no, I like that a lot.
What's next?
Another thing I think that's beneficial to talk about is, yes, it's important to have community, but how do we build that community? Because I feel like that's the hard part. It's like, yes, I know I need community, but moving to a new place, not knowing really anybody, it's like, how do I build this community? Where do I go? How do I find it? So how did you find community? Because I know you have a great one here in Virginia. So how did you find that?
Well, I'd say like it kind of goes back to like initially putting in our billets. I think especially at the academy, a lot of people looked at the list of options and kind of thought about what looked the most fun, like
Hawaii.
Hawaii, Florida, those places sound really great. But Nolan and I, we got some advice from a mentor to prioritize going with a Christian. And so the first year on my boat, I put in for a cutter that not only I had a Christian brother on that cutter, but I also knew that Virginia was a place where there is so much military, and meaning I already had friends here that were stationed here, and I also knew that there was like an OCF group here, and so when we put in for it, I intentionally sought that out. So that's just like one practical thing. It's like when you're looking at potential places you could go, don't get so blindsided by like what looks like big and shiny and really fun, but think about who's there. And I know a lot of my friends who got their top pick in the location that they wanted are now kind of like stepping back and being like, I realized what's really important, and I'm lonely here. And yes, they've gotten to know God in a deeper way, but also they are prioritizing community moving forward. So I mentioned OCF, like there's a lot of resources like that, groups to get involved with.
Planting roots.
Well, yeah. So I'll get into that. OCF, I mean, they just have a directory where you can go on and look at who is like in your area, which maybe we should do the same thing for planting roots. That gave me a good idea, so maybe we'll get on that.
I've thought about that too.
Yeah. So you can just look on the website and see like who is in the area. Yeah, we should definitely. Also, we're gonna do that. That's a good idea.
Yeah.
So things like that, prioritizing getting plugged into a church is absolutely huge. I mean, for again looking at Virginia, the second we found out we were getting here, a lot of our friends were scouring Zillow for places to live. We more so were looking for churches to go to and then basing where we live off of that.
Yeah.
Just because that is something we know is, I mean, again, the Bible talks about the importance of being part of, I mean, the church is not just a building, it is the church as a people group. And so we wanted somewhere that was going to preach the word. We had, a list of criteria for churches, preach the word, for a good community. Like we prioritize finding that, and getting involved there. It's easier. One quote that my husband always says, that it's my favorite quote from him, is that when you go through a big change in life, you always have the opportunity to either get closer or fall away. And so when you move, or when you start college, if you're younger, or if you get married, or if you have a child, like whenever we go through those like definitive life-shaping moments in our life, either we're going to actively choose to get closer, or by not choosing to get closer, we're inevitably going to fall further away from God. And so when you go to a place, if you initially go with the mindset that you're going to get closer to Christ and dive in at a church and get involved like right away, it's so much easier than when you get 2-3 months down the line and you're like, well, I haven't gotten involved yet. Now you're going to feel more awkward starting to get involved. So that's just a key tip. Again, practically make that list for PCS season of like, put in for a place where you know that you have fellowship, if that's an option for you. Second, prioritize finding a church where you are not only finding a church, but attending church events and finding different small groups to be a part of. Like, you got to seek it out. And it's not just going to fall on your lap. Sometimes it does, and God is very gracious in that way. But you have to be proactive. And again, don't just do it for yourself, consumer mindset, but do it because you want to go and be a light, which we're going to talk about a lot more next week when we talk about the importance of ministry. But those are just some practical tips. So.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. Matt and I don't have a ton of like military around us or a ton of military community around us, but we really found our community in our church. We knew, but that was the only church we visited. We stayed there because the first day.
Well, you heard about the church from another.
Yeah, another Coast Guard officer that I'm friends with, and he graduated a year before me. He went to this church, and so we decided to check it out. And we never tried a different one because it was a really great church, Bible preaching, great people, great community. And our first day, we had like a line of people like introducing us, asking us to get lunch. It was just, look for a church that has that. Don't look for a church where you just go in and out and you go unnoticed. Like, that can be easy.
And don't try to go unnoticed.
Yeah. And that can be the easy way. And sometimes I'm like, oh, I just like want to
sometimes your social energy is not there.
Yeah, but it's so important to get into a church that gets you out of your comfort zone and encourages you to build relationships with others, because that's how we built our community. We're involved in a small group, so that has really helped as well. So church is a really great place, and serving there is also a great place to meet people. So get involved. I also think it's so important to put yourself out there. It can be really hard moving to a different place to go up to somebody that you see at a coffee shop, or your hairdresser that you went to, or somebody at church, and be like, hey, do you want to get coffee sometime? Just ask people and put yourself out there. I mean, maybe not every person is going to end up being your best friend, but I think it's a good practice to have meeting new people. And
it also makes other people feel seen.
Yeah, you can be such a light in their lives. So I think that's important. And I think it's also important to note that friendships aren't found, they're forged. Like you have to work to build a friendship. Sometimes it's effortless, but a lot of times you have to really work and build, and it can take years, which is hard when you're always moving. But I think it's important because God calls us to live in a godly community. And I think so often we're looking for the perfect thing. Like we're looking for the perfect church. We're looking for the perfect spouse and the perfect friend. But truth be told, we're all imperfect people. So you're never going to find the perfect friend. So just take some people around you and really forge that friendship. Because we'll never be perfect, but Jesus is. And if he's in that friendship, it's going to bless you and you're going to bless them and God will be in it. So I think just really putting effort into building friendships, even when it seems hard and when it seems forced, because that's what you have to do to build friendships, and it gets easier.
It does. Yep. And you'll find those people who will be like lasting, lifelong friends who you'll always keep in contact with over like online means, which I think is such a gift. And it can be used for such good. And I think, FaceTime and social media is great in that sense. And at Planning Roots, we have a lot of resources that are virtual. I mean, even this podcast, we're talking to you through a screen or through like your AirPods in the car or something. But
we're friends.
And so it's great because we can be in community through virtual means, even if you've never met us, like we're part of your community, which is kind of cool. And that is so awesome. And Planting Roots has a lot of other online means to get connected and to feel like part of that community, and to connect and make real relationships through the internet. But I also just want to ask, like, why you think, again, going back to that initial like military, first couple of years military girl who's like, okay, I have my few girls that I call every once in a while. Why do I need friends here? Like, why do you think in-person friendships are important?
I think it's important to have in-person friends so that you can be a part in filling somebody else's cup as well. God is going to use you in that friendship. If there's a girl that you feel he's calling you to, go out and ask her to go get coffee, and allow God to use you in her life. I feel like sometimes I can be selfish, and when it comes to like making friends, like, oh, I want this friend because it makes me feel good, but that's not like what godly community is and what God has called us to. He's called us to be in a community to bless others and serve others. And it can be hard to like serve my friends who are thousands of miles away. So I think it's important to serve the people that are around you and the people that God has put into your life. And don't just like build community with the Christian girls in your church. Like there are people at work and that I meet through that and other places that might not know Christ, but God can use you in their life to bring them into Christ, invite them to church, invite them to get coffee, tell them what God's doing in your life, because building community is also a form of ministry, which we're going to talk about next week. But there are so many girls in the military too that probably feel lonely. It can be a lonely place for women, whether you're active duty or a wife. It could be a really lonely place being in that space. So I think it's really important to get the girls together and build that community and really pour into those places. Like, yes, I have my friends from church, but I've been convicted and trying to be intentional about developing those friendships with the women who are in the workplace around me and inviting those people into our homes and just speaking life to them and speaking truth over them and inviting them to different events that they might have not otherwise felt welcome to, and just welcoming people in, because I think that is how I found Christ, and I want God to use me in that way to lead others to Christ.
Well, and sometimes the people that you least expect to ever come to know the Lord, you kind of have those people who are like, oh, like they'll never be a Christian, and as far from a Christian as you might think. Like those are the ones that surprise you. And I had a pretty convicting experience on my cutter just with a coworker. Like we were very different people. Like her and I couldn't have been more different. Like just in what we believe and the way we've lived our lives, but God used her to grow me, and she became one of my really good friends, and I still talk to her to this day. And again, don't have any basis of faith, but at one point when we were underway, she called me out for just being negative and snarky at one point. And at first I didn't really take her criticism seriously, just because I was like, oh, like, she's not a Christian. She like doesn't have any like say in my life. But I was like, I went into my room and I reflected. I'm like, why the heck did I think that like God wasn't working through her, even though like she might not know the Lord, God can still work through her. And I was shocked that like I had so much refinement to do in my own life. And
that shows that she knows, like, oh, this is what a Christian like looks like. Like, you're not
exactly,
why are you not acting like this? And that's like, I had that happen too.
And that was very convicting. Of like, shoot, like, dude, she's right. Like,
yeah,
like I am not being a good witness right now. And it was cool that like she was able to call that out in me, even though she doesn't know God herself. Like, and we've continued to have good conversations, and I pray for her every day that she'll come to know the Lord. So yeah, it's important not only with Christians, but to put yourself in uncomfortable situations and be open to, and again, we're going to talk about this next week, but be open to just community with non-believers too, and bringing them into your godly community.
Yeah.
Also, another reason it's important to have like in-person friendships is over the phone, even if it's unintentional, it's really easy to just tell your side of the story and to project yourself and your life in a way that you want to. And not to say we're trying to be deceptive, but sometimes like you might have a view of how you're living that is different than reality.
Yeah,
and so
they can't see.
Yeah, they can't see how you're interacting with other people or like anything. So if you have people that you're spending time with in person, then they're going to be way more equipped and have evidence to call you out on, which again isn't always comfortable, but your people who are over the phone aren't going to be able to see that. And it's been the hardest for me to like accept when I get called out by friends. Like I'm just not very good. I'm not very good with criticism, and it's something I'm trying to get better. But like, and I want to receive better, and I want that for my friends. So I'm telling you as my friends that I want godly criticism.
Here it comes.
Because that's the whole point, is that each day get closer to the Lord. And again, like we experience joy through community, but we also experience the iron sharpening iron, which is not comfortable. It's sparky. But I wanted to say too, just if you are in a place physically, because there are some units like this in the military where like there is no good church. Like, there are no small groups. There are no nothing. Like, sometimes that's going to be the case. Like, I have friends down in Key West who, like, tried to find a church.
Yeah, that's the case for my friends.
Community, and it just, like, hasn't worked out for them. And they're going to take advantage of online means. That's always, like, a good piece of advice. But also, start something yourself. Like, if you're looking for godly community, odds are somebody down there is as well. And for sure pray about that. Like, God, please bring people into my life. Like, I need other Christians around me, but don't be afraid to start a study yourself and get the word out there. I mean, share it wherever you can. Planting Roots, we talked about last week, has a lot of good resources for, I'll show the pile we got here. We got a ton of resources that can help you structure a Bible study if you've never led a Bible study before. We're still newbies. I mean, we've led Bible studies, but are by no means experts. But God has worked through us, and we believe He'll work through you. So if you need some structure, check these out. We'll have them linked down below. And there's new ones coming too, so be on the lookout for those. And yeah, do you have any closing thoughts?
One thing that I remember doing during COVID is, like, we couldn't meet together, have a small group. So if that is something you're struggling with, I started like a Zoom Bible study with some of my friends, and we just met on Zoom and read through scripture together. So that's always an idea too. Like, technology is so
COVID opened up some of those doors.
Yeah, cool. Get on Zoom, get on FaceTime, and just get in the Word with your friends. And just, I know it's not the best way because you don't have people seeing your every move, but if that's all you can do, then it's better than nothing. And you have people speaking truth and life into your life, and people that you can confess to and bring your problems to.
And as always, it's always about the heart posture. If you're seeking, then God always, He always provides. So
yeah, pray about it, because I remember, I think it was, during third class year when I was struggling and wanting to leave and all that stuff, I remember praying for community. And like, one of my best friends to this day, I met through Friday night fellowship at the academy, and she went to the college across the street. So pray about community, pray that you'll find godly friends, and God will answer that prayer. Yeah, in some way.
So make sure to come back next week for our last episode of the Back to Our Roots series. And this was Erin
and Liz.
And we pray that you stay deeply rooted.